Hi, welcome everyone to episode 4 of Club Ausome Live. As this month is Pride Month, we have a Pride themed live event today. I'm your host, Charlie Hart, also known as Awesome Charlie. I'm an escapee from a long career in HR. I'm a neurodiversity advocate and now a keynote speaker promoting neurodiversity and LGBTQIA+ acceptance and inclusion. I'm autistic, ADHD, bisexual, pansexual, and gender non-conforming, and I promote understanding, acceptance, and support for those on the double rainbow. And when I say that, I mean people who are both LGBTQIA+ and neurodivergent. This is an intersection referred to as the double rainbow because we fall into two spectrums and they both use rainbow imagery. And I do this in an attempt to make the world better for my daughters and others like them. There's a significant correlation between neurodivergence and LGBTQIA+, and we're unfortunately at a much higher risk of discrimination, bullying, and even suicide. I'm joined today by Valeria Martucci. We met on LinkedIn last year through our shared interest in neurodiversity and LGBT. And we're now both members of the Speakers Collective. And for those that don't know, the Speakers Collective, it's a social enterprise, a community of over 100 inspirational and passionate lived experience speakers. It's a mutually supportive community with a shared commitment, working together to challenge stigma, facilitate important conversations, and promote learning on a variety of social issues. Please check out the website and the socials. Now, Valeria, could you introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little about yourself?
So first of all, thank you, Charlie, for inviting me. So my name is Valeria, and I currently work as a project manager in the telecommunication industry, and I'm autistic, ADHD, and non-binary, gender fluid, and so I'm, as we call in our neurodiversity community, I'm late diagnosed because I received my ADHD and autism diagnosis back in 2022 when I was 34 years old. And since then, it was like starting life from scratch in a certain way because I could understand backwards a lot of things about myself which I didn't understand. And since then, I started with the neurodiversity advocacy and the public speaking. It is actually something very new. That's my very first live stream. So, and my advocacy started once my disclosure. When I disclosed my diagnosis first, this was handled in my opinion, in a very bad way, which since then I understood how much space, room for learning and improvement is still here in UK, but also in other places, and to actually try to prevent any other neurodivergent person to face the same, because we will discuss, I think, going ahead in this live, what a lot of our presentations and the way we behave and respond to the external world are completely misunderstood and mishandled. So yeah, we'll go more in depth during the live, I guess. Shall you have something else to add?
I totally agree. I think we're doubly at risk of being misunderstood because we are diverging from the normal, both in how our brains are wired and our experiences as well in our environment, but also in our gender expression. And so there's so many ways that we differ from Joe or Josephine standard that we're often misunderstood. So I'd like to share a little bit about my own experience of being bisexual and gender non-conforming and my late diagnosis of autism and ADHD. So when I was growing up, I didn't really know that it was a thing that most people were only attracted to one gender, and it was usually the opposite gender. I just didn't really think about it. So all of my life, I'd grown up being attracted to various people of any genders. Didn't really think much about it until I was about 15. So quite late, maybe. I was a bit naive, I think. When I was about 15, I realised that some people are gay and some people are bisexual, and that the majority, I think, at least present as being heterosexual. So there was something different about me. But I didn't know I was autistic or ADHD until my 40s. So all the way through childhood, I was autistic and ADHD, obviously, but I didn't know. My brother's autistic, but we knew because he had learning disabilities as well, and he was very hyperactive. So he went to a special school, and I was doing okay at school. I was never part of a big group. I was never in the trendy kids gangs or anything. I always had like one best friend, and I had fierce crushes on people as well, and very intense interests. So I was a bit of a loner, and my interests were quite sort of nerdy, and they definitely weren't things that other girls my age were into. And I didn't do makeup and hair. I had short hair, and I did taekwondo. When I was younger, I played cowboys and Indians, and I was never into Barbies and Cindy's and things. And from a very young age, sorry, this is really not well prepared at all because I've had such a busy week, but from a really young age, I didn't really think of myself as being a girl. So I don't identify as trans, but just female descriptors just don't quite sit right with me. So from the age of about 4 or 5, I was cutting my hair short and telling everyone to call me Charlie. So my actual name is Charlotte, and I haven't changed my name. It's still officially Charlotte, but everyone calls me Charlie, and that's because I wanted a gender neutral name. Just anything girly just doesn't sit well with me. So I call myself gender non-conforming. I haven't really embraced the whole non-binary thing, but I think if been born a little later, maybe I would. So I think we've got a lot to learn with the younger generation of today, and I'm learning from my teenagers all the time. So it's kind of weird, but when you're autistic, you're often misunderstood, I think. So I went through life already struggling to make friends and influence people and have some professional clout and build appropriate working relationships. And then you throw into the mix that I was bisexual as well. And I've been put in a lot of situations where people have misunderstood my intentions towards them, or they think that because I'm bisexual, I'm attracted to anybody, and that anyone's a potential target. I don't know, but it has caused me some real issues at work, and it's made me very, very unconfident about making friends with, particularly with women. So it's a very interesting intersection. I'm really rambling, so Valeria, could you tell me about your experience of being late diagnosed and non-binary?
Okay, so regarding the non-binary thing, non-binarism, because it's very difficult to explain and also to identify. Non-binarism is not related to orientation. It's just an identity. So a non-binary person can be attracted, like in my case, by men or by women or by other non-binary or trans-identifying people. So it's nothing strictly related to orientation. It's more like an identity. And in my case, I found out I fall into the gender fluid term because so non-binarism is an umbrella term. So you can use non-binary to actually define a much wider spectrum of identities. So I say gender fluid because the expression of my gender may vary over the time. So, or also I may have expression which are related to both the genders. So, for example, since my childhood, I enjoyed to play with girls' toys like dolls, but I also enjoyed a lot to play with my brother's toys. So I had both girls and boys interests and also behaviors. So, for example, I was very often told off because I sit when I sit on the chairs. I didn't sit like in a way which was convenient to the girls. So I was told, please don't sit like a boy, because I tended to open my legs, but it came natural to me. Or, for example, I felt much more comfortable dressing up with boys' clothes rather than girls' clothes. I couldn't stand the skirts, and even now, for example. So this was I thought I was a tomboy on a certain way, also because of the interest I had. The same as Charlie, I played the taekwondo as well, like my siblings.
Oh wow! I didn't know we had that in common.
Yeah, I was a yellow belt back then, in my teenage. And yeah, I also liked, for example, even in the TV shows, I used to watch the anime, which were mostly targeted to boys, because I find them more exciting than the ones targeted for girls.
Yes.
All of this stuff. And then growing up, educating myself a bit more, I say, okay, I may fall into the non-binarism. And a very funny thing is that sometimes people tend to think that the only way to be non-binary for an individual which is female at birth is having an expression which is opposite to their gender. So I've been told by someone who knew me, no, you can't be, no way you are non-binary because you don't look like a man. So
Yeah.
probably you are confusing being a trans man or a trans masculine person with a non-binary, because a non-binary person can have an presentation which is independent. So I still have a presentation matching my gender at birth, and I still use she and alongside with they, and I still use my name because my female side is still part of being a gender fluid, because
Yes.
I can have both expressions. So I'm not a trans man, otherwise I would have changed my name and pronouns. I'm a person whose identity fluctuates, and yeah, again, someone say, okay, this is schizophrenia. No, because my personality doesn't change. It's just the way I express myself, which may change according to the period, to how do I feel, and so on.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, exactly.
Although I have long hair, so people look at me and think that I identify as a woman because I've got long hair and makeup. But then if they see me speaking on stage, I've got a very blokey swagger, and I've never felt girly in my life. So, and I'd much rather go on a boys' night out than a girls' night out as well. Most of my friends are men.
Yeah, me too. And I find easier to make friendships with men rather than with women or other female at birth most of the time. And regarding autism and ADHD, that's something even more complex, because I had the autistic label since way before the diagnosis, because some of my traits are very visible. For example, I have alexithymia, which is the thing that my face expression doesn't always match my emotions. So I may look the best I may look is boring and inexpressive. The worst I may look is arrogant. I've been told both.
I get that a lot as well. Yeah, it's like I've got a certain cockiness, I think. But underneath the surface, I'm riddled with neuroses and insecurities.
Yeah,
I
but
look like a swaggering peacock, which is more of a typically male thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's actually because our brains sometimes are just disconnected from face expressions. And so in my childhood, because I didn't know this was caused by autism, and even if a doctor I had back then raised the hypothesis that I may have been autistic. Back then, my teachers, my parents, whatever, they say, no, it can be because autistic children don't speak. At the time,
Oh, no.
yeah, back then only
In Italy, this was that.
yeah, in Italy, yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, in general, only non-verbal children were considered autistic diagnosis material. So other level of autism, which I was even, I think I was hyperlexic, and I talked even too much because I learned to read very early in my life. I spoke very early as well. So I said, no way can be autistic. No way this child can be autistic. But then since I had other signs, like when I was in my classroom, I was very overwhelmed at a point. So I ended up having a very strong meltdowns in which I messed up everything and so on. And then unfortunately, for all my school years and till the teenage, I had the famous being mentally ill. People were scared by me. And when I started university, I dropped out because of I had many challenges, including that people didn't want me to be in their group because I looked strange, all of this stuff. And early career was a nightmare as well because I was one of the employers in particular noticed that I may have had some very stereotypical autistic traits, even if I wasn't diagnosed. And he said, no, you look like the Rain Man, you look like the Small Wonder, you can't be with the public, and blah, blah, blah. And then after a few years in UK, after having worked with someone who was a late diagnosed himself, being ADHD himself, I've seen a lot of things in common with this person. And I say, okay, I'll definitely undertake the assessment myself to see, is this label I have had since decades true, or is just something else?
Yes.
And that's, of course, that's after years of bullying, discrimination, a lot of stuff. And in May 2022, I had the sentence that I was combined ADHD, means having both inattentiveness and impulsivity traits, because ADHD has three presentation for people who doesn't know, is inattentive, which affects the attention span, impulsive, which is related to impulsiveness of personality. So you can in order to chase dopamine, you can make, for example, impulsive shopping. You may have vices, which luckily is not my case. You may, you may do very instinctive things to chase the immediate satisfaction related to the dopamine production. And autism, it came out as five out of 10 marks, because when you do the DIVA, you get both. So I say, okay, I'm ADHD. But then when I had the bad idea to disclose to my management back then, and I got an occupational health report, which was completely misinterpreted. So what OH report said, allowing more time to complete the tasks, getting like a quiet place to decompress, and something similar like this. This was interpreted, more time was interpreted as only back office, remove them from every customer interaction because they are back office is less time critical. Let's isolate this person from the team. And I felt awful, very awful. HR didn't want to listen to me. My manager didn't want to listen to me. I said, speak to HR, speak to HR. But then I spoke to HR. I even escalated to the HR director. And they said, no, we are not using your diagnosis against you. We are helping you. And then
helping you by shoving you away on your own and isolating you. Great.
And then I want to remember.
Sorry, I talk in sarcasm all the time. I keep getting told off about that because not every person that I interact with always understands it. But I'm naturally really sarcastic. But when they think they're helping us, but what they're actually doing is othering us. That's one of my pet hates.
Exactly. And then
we're not imposing self-limitations by disclosing a diagnosis. We're advocating for our own needs and saying there's certain ways that we can work and you can work with us that will help us to thrive in our roles.
And the thing is,
not enough people understand that yet.
Which is why we do what we do. You should always ask to the person first. You have to be very clear, ask how we can support you, which adjustments do you need. You don't have to assume, because if I get isolated from the rest of the team as I did, if I get removed from customer interaction, of course I got PTSD since then. So it's not something to just assume. So that's the thing. That's why I say I don't want any other neurodivergent to happen the same. That's where
Yeah.
I started my advocacy.
I've got a really mixed career history, so lots of things that have worked really well for me, and lots of things that were complete inclusion fails. So between that and my knowledge of employment law and HR best practice, I think I'm quite well positioned to say, "Oh, this is great, but you should be doing this," or "Wouldn't it be so much better if you did that?" And it's all I want to talk about now. It's like I think there's so much listening that organizations, employers could do that, and there are so many quick wins that could make workplaces more inclusive. But shall we do a bit of myth busting? So what myths and misconceptions about being neurodivergent and LGBT would you like to clear up?
So in regards of non-binary identity, which is still is that the person has to necessarily in the external presentation as to necessarily have an external presentation not matching their gender at birth. That's a myth, because non-binarism is not only about being trans, and because some trans people are actually still on a binary point of view. So, for example, female at birth identifying as a trans man are still a binary presentation.
Yeah.
Someone identifying as a gender fluid but being female at birth as not necessary to present themselves in a masculine way, and exactly the same as the opposite, AMAB individual identifying themselves as gender fluid does not necessarily have to look like feminine to be considered non-binary. Non-binarism sometimes is I would define as a state of mind. How do you feel? How do you express? Is a way of expression which is not necessarily related to the external appearance. And yeah, that's what I say. And
I agree.
also,
Yeah. I mean, I don't, as I said, I don't necessarily identify as non-binary or gender fluid, but I'm really uncomfortable with being boxed in to this woman box. But
yeah,
so I say I'm gender non-conforming, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. But people look at me with my hair and makeup and assume that I'm a woman and that I'm okay to be referred to like that. But internally, I don't feel that. It's more agender, I guess, with me. I don't really identify as either gender. I'm just Charlie.
yeah. And yeah, what else is, and also it doesn't have anything to do with the personality change, because I heard this as well and I find it very funny. So having different non-conforming expression of your identity doesn't mean that you have multiple personality or you're schizophrenic. I heard also this on
Yeah.
for example, on YouTube, on TikTok, on all people uh, presenting themselves, identifying themselves as a non-binary. I got
Yeah.
also all of these comments like, "No, you're actually schizophrenic. Your non-binarism
Oh,
doesn't
the
exist."
ignorance is so loud. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get that people making an assumption that if you've got a girl presentation and a boy presentation, that means that you've got different minds, really, and it's more like dissociative identity disorder. But it's not a split. I'm really blah today. It's not a split personality, is it? It's all one person, but fluctuating in how you feel and how you present.
yeah.
And yeah, go on.
No, I was saying, yes, just the same person having different ways to express themselves, nothing to do with the actual personality.
Mm,
That's it.
yeah,
I don't know
definitely.
if it happened to you as well, being told, no, if you was born on a certain gender and your identity is different, then you must be schizophrenic. I don't know if you ever heard this. No.
Yeah, it's not even what schizophrenia is. If they would look a little bit more into the subject, but it's the other thing that I've come across a lot is people assuming that if you're non-binary, that you have to look androgynous.
Yes, I heard that as well.
How can you be non-binary? You look like a woman or you look like a man. And to me, that it's taking the binary, the gender binary, which is arbitrary anyway, and then forcing it to become a gender tertiary. So there's this new third category that is just as limiting and boxing in as male and female. So completely defeats the object, I think, of non-binary identities, because we're trying to break away from that and do something a bit more freeing and unique to us. But I hear that a lot. And some of the representation in the media as well. So if you look at Kate Asia Dillon, I think their name is, that was in Billions, they're very, what's the word? Very, begins with H. Yeah. They don't look male or female. No, it doesn't begin with H. It's androgynous. They're very androgynous. So if that's the first that you've seen from watching that program, and you've seen this androgynous non-binary person, then it isn't doing any favors to those that are more individual. And I'm really rambling today. I must apologize. I've done a lot this week. I've spoken at conferences and done a lot of traveling, and it's been one of those weeks where I'm just like on the edge of completely overloaded, but just about hanging in there. So I'm going to need a long walk after this, I think.
Probably the same.
What about myths about being neurodivergent?
That is a very, very, very long stuff.
We could have a full day session on this, I'm sure, but what's your favourite?
So I can say, so the one, which is the one I'm most, how can I say, disturbed by, is thinking that every autistic person or ADHD, because ADHD is autistic and ADHD, must not be people facing, must be socially awkward, must not learn, doesn't worth to spend time, at least in a traditional work setting, to teach this person a soft skill they may not have. For example, I got before diagnosis, way before diagnosis, because due to alexithymia and lack of eye contact and all of the traits which come embedded with the autistic neurotype, I've been most of the time seen as a very socially awkward person, despite customers liked me, despite I was always open to participate to events, always open to communicate. So I've always been expected, for me was always expected a very high performance, or otherwise I was threatened to be sent home. So if I didn't tick all the boxes to be a perfect example in my role on the technical side, then was finished with me, because I've been told the soft skills can't be learned, you aren't ready. This also, I'm talking about my past work experiences. So I got an instance in which our performance was measured by percentage. So like 80% was the minimum, and I was around 60 or 70. I was told, or you reach 80 or you go home. Another team member instead, which was constantly below 80, and I say, okay, I'm sorry for them, probably they will suck them. No, this person was very bubbly, very sociable, very open, very smiling. It got promoted twice in 3 years, but no one cared that this person was below 80.
Yeah.
Or, for example, it happens in some past experiences as well that my employers were much stricter when I made a mistake, and even for a single mistake, I got taken away by the complete task. So, for example, on a previous in a previous work setting, I accidentally broken a fiber while I was splicing, and since then I was banned from splicing forever, just for a mistake.
But they wouldn't do that with a neurotypical colleague, would they?
Yeah, there was another person
Yeah.
who did the same
It's
mistake.
so
But
pathologizing, isn't it? It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
we have intense, highly focused special interests like obsessions, but neurotypicals have hobbies. Well,
yeah.
yeah,
But
maybe ours are more intense, but
before
that's where
the
expertise comes from, and that's a positive thing.
yeah, no, that was before diagnosis anyway. So I think it's
Yeah,
still my something in my behaviors, because it's okay. So this person doesn't has no social skills from what it appeared. There are very poor ones. It's not true, but I'm just uh, extroverted in a neurodivergent way. I will have found out with the time. So, or this is excellent on the technical point of view. Otherwise, it doesn't worth to go ahead. First mistake, kaput. Or otherwise, another thing, even earlier, before diagnosis, when I worked in the hospitality industry, which I actually loved, every time that I said that I wanted to go to do more than being just a waitress, I wanted to explore the supervisor and the management path. I was told, but why you don't come back to university for 50 cents more? It doesn't work. Or instead, other colleagues having matching the what looked like the right personality on a neurotypical point of view, even if they were like 10 years younger than me. Oh, okay, go. Let's. The day after they got handled the supervisor responsibilities, just to see how did they go.
yeah, definitely. I've got so many myths and misconceptions about bisexuality and being gender non-conforming and neurodiversity. I wouldn't know where to start, but I'll one of the ones that really bugs me is that people think that bisexuality is about who you're with or who you're married to or who you're sleeping with. And to me, it's very much part of who I am. It's my identity. So yes, I'm married to a man now, and my first husband as well was a man. But I've had relationships with women and non-binary people as well, and I've been attracted to many different people from right across the gender spectrum. But who I am is what determines my identity. It's not who I'm with. But what else was I going to say? I'm so vague today. I must apologise. I'm usually way more organised than this. But in terms of autism, yeah, you mentioned alexithymia. So my emotions are very deep under the surface, but they are big emotions. I'm just not that in touch with them, and I don't always know how to express them. So it really bugs me that people think that we lack empathy because I'm actually hyper empathic, and I can get really dragged down by the feelings of other people around me. Or equally, I can get excitable because one of my friends or someone I love is excitable. So I'm soaking up feelings like a sponge, and to me, that makes me highly empathic. But because I'm not great at saying the right thing and making my face do the right thing, people might think I don't care, and it's so far from the truth. Having a face that goes from a flat effect where I'm not expressing myself in my face at all to jumping about eyebrows and flappy hands can make my feelings unintelligible to others as well, I think. So I just would really like to just put in the bin this idea that we're unfeeling and cold and say that we're just misunderstood. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's true, because punctually happens to me as well. I'm also often mistook for someone not showing enthusiasm, but actually my enthusiasm is just shown differently, maybe from the passion I put in the things I do. Because unfortunately, with alexithymia, it's very difficult. It's not because we don't want to express emotion; we just can't sometimes.
Yeah.
It requires a very hard work, and it's also exacerbated by traumas. And many of us experience traumas due to the way we are perceived, discrimination, everything that concerns being neurodivergent or representing any other minority. So I think probably also alexithymia may grow, may build up the more trauma you build up, and the more alexithymia becomes evident.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So I was treated a number of years ago with psychodynamic therapy for my complex PTSD. And I thought I'd recovered from it, really. But then after my son died, it's just back with a vengeance. So 5 years ago, I was not feeling much at all. I was pretty numb a lot of the time and doing normal things. And I think people were looking at me thinking, how can she be just going about her life as normal so soon after her son dying? But I would have to actively do things to open the floodgates if I wanted to feel the feelings. So things like drinking an excessive amount of alcohol, watching a sad film, and then I would cry, but I looked like some kind of totally cold ice maiden, I think, until I actually did that. So you've got the PTSD there and disassociation, I think, and alexithymia and my flat effect and just being misunderstood in general. I will have to write about all this at some point. I think there's so much I've got to say on this topic. Have you got any advice for others about how they could support and show empathy and compassion to young people on that double rainbow intersection of autistic and LGBT?
Uh, the only thing I can say from my experience is just to be always open to dialogue, to actually talk with those people and never assume, because the assumptions are very, very damaging from my experience and in general. And it's also very easy for those kind of young people to be pigeonholed, to be seen as they are not, so maybe as socially awkward, strange, or being just a face, because we know that the teenagers sometimes have because they are growing up, they may have some faces, and this face is just a short period of things in which someone may think about this and then it finishes. But we have to, through the dialogue, through the understanding, we have to actually learn to discern a face from the actual feeling or identity of a person. And
Yeah,
also, if someone is neurodivergent, we have never to assume that, for example, if like a trans teenager identifying themselves as a trans is because they don't have enough introspection to understand their gender, because they are autistic, because they are ADHD. This is like weaponizing someone's diagnosis.
absolutely. I think for me, it's really about listening and believing people with an open mind and an open heart. So, particularly if they're kids, they're still growing and learning about themselves, and they know who they are better than anybody else, even their parents. But they are just small human people with brains of their own, and
Yeah.
we need to be able to listen to them with unconditional love and open minds, and not say, oh, you don't know your own mind, or don't deny them agency if they're autistic, and say you don't know what you're talking about because you're autistic and you're young. Because I can't
Yes.
influence my autistic kids to load the dishwasher, let alone tell them what gender they are, or what who to be attracted to, or anything like that. These are people who know their own minds. They're just younger, and autism doesn't make us less likely to know who we are. If anything, more, because we're not that interested in complying with societal norms. We're more likely to be weird and different, and to realize that that isn't such a bad thing. So
Yeah.
I try to extend unconditional love and understanding and support to my kids, and they're not going to tell me everything because it's embarrassing talking to mum, but they know that I'm not going to judge them harshly for any decisions they make about their own identities.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for sharing your experience and advice, and thank you to the audience for joining us for this conversation. I really hope it was insightful, I really hope to have you on again for different themes as well, Valeria. I think you've got a lot to offer. Please do connect with Valeria, and I'll see you all again in a couple of weeks for another Club Ausome Live. And meanwhile, happy Pride Month. Please continue to love us and accept us for who we are. And thank you so much for being here.